Hi, and welcome to Home Assistant How-To with BeardedTinker. Today, finally, we will be integrating a thermal printer inside Home Assistant. We'll start in 10 seconds. Before we go any further, as always, I really would like to thank all the members who have joined my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Your support really means a lot. And you can also support me by clicking subscribe button or joining the channel. Thank you. I did have the break from this project, unfortunately, due to some other videos and priorities that I had to record. If you are following me on the Twitter, or if you maybe seen my stream about a month and a half ago, then you've also seen my project Thermal Printer. That's not really my project in terms of I created the printer, but I've seen a couple of projects and then decided to try and put a different twist on it. So currently you can find on the internet project called Daily News, and this Daily News project allows you to print each morning or whatever time you select headlines from the RSS feed, which is a great concept and I really do like that project. But there are two things that I didn't like in that project. First of all, for that project you had to use Raspberry Pi. Of course you can use Raspberry Pi 0W and it will work great, but I think that this piece of hardware is overkill for such a project. Second of all, I also wanted something to be able to print messages from Home Assistant, not just to be integrated that you can see paper status, is there an error or things like that, but to be able to push notifications such as precision notifications that we have here to a thermal printer. Why? Why not? Really, there isn't any specific reason, but I just think that the idea is really great and it can push the limits of your creativity. So feel free to create your own stuff. Okay, so what I did? Not much really. I found additional repository on the internet that allows you to use the ESP8266 board, which can be bought pretty cheaply, and hook it up to this printer. Also, if you have a 3D printer, you can go to the link down in the description of the video, download the STL files and print from the morning news case, which really fits nicely, and you only have one wire sticking out of the printer, and that's the USB cable. So with ESP board, two wires, soldering iron, thermal printer, 3D printer, and the USB cable for power, you get a whole round solution that is a, let's call it like that, a wireless thermal printer. Also, by using this other repository, I'm able to use MQTT to push notifications to printer. And you see the catch. You can then hook it up in Node-RED, you can hook it up in Home Assistant, you can hook it up in anything that talks MQTT and push messages there, and the printer will print it. So what's the use case for that? Up to you. Every morning at 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock, you can have weather information. You're going on a vacation? No problem. You can use this printer as an audit event printer, where it would print all the critical information while you are away. Be careful. While testing, I did manage to use whole roll of the thermal paper by just testing it. So, yeah. What are some other options? You can use it to log alarms, events. You can use it to log door open sensors or door close sensors, movement sensors, something triggered by camera motion, critical events such as USGS, Geological Service Sensor, or meteor alarm, or whatever. In my case, I've used it for testing purposes to annoy people with whom I live with, so my family, but also to have fun. And what are the prerequisites for this project? As I said, you need to have the printer itself. You need to buy ESP8266 boards. You do need two cables because we will need to solder cables between the board, printer, and the power supply or power cable. You also need a USB cable. I recommend using USB because it's the simplest and the cheapest way to connect it to provide power to both printer and the ESP board. And If you have a 3D printer, you can print the box. So let's get started. First things first, let me show you how you need to connect ESP board, printer with the USB power cable. So here is everything in a box. This box was taken from the project called Morning News that allows you to print the RSS feed from the internet with the news, of course, every day. And this is the printer itself. When I was putting everything together, I forgot to put the cable first inside, then solder it, so I had to remove this piece here, but yeah, and not tidy, but this is the whole setup. And let me pull everything out. Okay, so how do you connect everything? And it's pretty easy, really. You have a printer, and printer has to have connection with the data cable, which goes here, and the power cable that goes here. Power cable is straightforward, you just plug it in. You have black and red wire. Black is negative, red is positive. And same negative and positive wires also go to the ESP board. And they go to 5 volts and ground on the ESP board. So as you can see, this USB cable is connected to the red and black wire on the printer, but it's also sharing wires with the ESP board, also 5 volt and ground. Okay, now comes a bit harder part, but really also very easy. Let's connect the data cable. So with data cable, you have 5 wires, out of which 2 will not be used. Yellow and black are not used. On the box you can see also the names of the pins. So red one is ground. Yeah, I know, it should be much easier or straightforward to use the black wire, but for some reason they used red cable. So this red cable is connected to the ground or the negative wire of the USB cable. So we have here 3 ground wires. Red going to the data connection, and 2 that are going to the printer power and the ground and the ESP board ground. Next we have 2 cables, green and blue. If you look on the box, we have receive and transmit. Green is received and blue is transmit. And this is connected to the ESP board with the green going to the D2 and blue going to the D3. On the ESP board, we have only 4 connections. Red wire going to the 5 volts, black wire going to the ground, blue wire going to the D3, and green wire going to the D2. And this pretty much is it. After you have connected everything, you can connect it either by soldering or using DuPont cables or whatever. The next step, of course, is to flash the firmware. And in order to flash the firmware, you just have to connect this cable, USB cable, to your computer. And this is it here. Let's go to the PC. After you have prepared everything and connected everything, the next step is to connect the ESP board to your computer with the USB cable. After you have connected that, let's go to the repository, and yes, I do have my repository for this project, where we will be downloading our code. The only code that we need are really 2 files. It's main.ino, which is the main file with the code, and the example config.h, which is the file that holds the configuration for this project. And yes, I really do hope that some of you will find this project useful and that there will be contributions to the project. My programming skills are really limited. This project is forked from the original author, but I did do some adjustments and improvements to the code. Still, there are a lot of possibilities on how to improve the code, but my programming skills are next to none. Okay, if you have an idea how to improve it, please do a pull request and I will try to include that in this project. But let's get back to the code. Press on Code, download zip, and you will be downloading file that contains all the code that we need. Extract it somewhere. I will extract it to the desktop and open Arduino IDE. If you do not have Arduino IDE, I will be posting a link in the description of the video too. After you have unpacked everything, let's go to File, Open. I have unpacked it on the desktop. And I will be opening main.ino. The main needs to be copied to the folder called main. Okay. And this is a file that contains all the code, but we need to make additional change. Let me close this quickly. Let's go to this folder and let's copy this example configuration H file to the folder where our main.ino file is located. Also, I will rename it from the example-config to config.h. Now let's reopen everything, and here it is, main file and the configuration H file. In main file we do not have to edit anything, but in configuration file we have to edit and configure this based on our own configuration. First thing is change the name of SSID. Next, insert here the password for your Wi-Fi. Next line is the IP address of the MQTT server. If you are using username and password for the MQTT, here is the line where you need to change the user and password. If you're not using them, just delete them. A line called myID is the ID of the printer, and this is how the system, or later on Home Assistant, will recognize it. If you're not planning to have multiple thermal printers, you can leave this as is. MQTT port, this is the default MQTT port. You do not have to change it unless, of course, you change the default port. And the line below that is the baud rate for the thermal printer. You can leave it at 9600 bauds per second. Following line is the MQTT topic, and this is the topic that the printer will be listening to. So it will subscribe to the MQTT server to this topic, and it will be listening for any incoming messages to that topic. You can for now leave it as is or change, but we will be using this same topic later on inside Home Assistant for testing purposes. The two lines that I've added here allow you to change the size of the letters. With the S being default for the size, which is for small, you have option of using either small, medium or large, S, M and L. And the line below it is the row spacing. It allows you to select what will be the spacing between two lines. The minimum value that is currently default here is the 24, but the default value is 32. I suggest that you leave it at 24 because, in my opinion, even 24 is a bit of too high number for a row spacing. Okay, so we have now configured everything here. And for the next step, make sure that you have connected your ESP8266 board to your PC. Because what we'll do next is we will compile and upload the firmware. Let's go back to main. Inside main, as I said, we do not have to configure anything, but we are using some libraries. If, when you try to compile, receive a warning that the library doesn't exist, what you have to do is you have to go to Tools, Manage Libraries, and search here for the library name that is missing. You will see here error message and the missing library name. For example, let's pretend that pub sub client library is missing, which is this one here. If we search for it, scroll down, you will see here pub sub client, and you just have to press on install. Okay, so I'm ready. I'll make sure that the correct COM port is selected, and it is, and I will press upload. It will take a couple of seconds for everything to compile and upload to the board. You should see the upload process here. And that's it. At this point, you can disconnect the ESP8266 board from your computer and hook up the USB cable to provide power to the thermal printer and the board itself. So let me do that quickly. And how will you know that everything is working correctly? Well, it's simple. If you hooked everything up, wired as I previously showed you, when you connect the USB to the power cable, it should start. First thing that printer will show you is the line saying, and it says printer starting, host name, connecting to the Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi connected, and then MQTT connected. And this gives you all the feedback that printer can give you, meaning that it is working, it has successfully connected to the Wi-Fi network, and it has also hooked up to MQTT network. So that's it. Now we can proceed with the configuration inside Home Assistant. Okay, so in Home Assistant, how do we use it and how do we hook it up in automations? Well, it's pretty easy. Unfortunately, my programming skills are and I wasn't able to replicate the 3 sensors that Morning News has. Those are the paper runout sensor, error sensor, and printer online sensor. So if anybody wants to look at that, my code is available on the GitHub. But what I was able to do is to push messages from Home Assistant to the thermal printer. And there are 2 ways to do it. First, we will do it by hand to show you how it works, and later on we will put it inside automations. The one automation I will create now is just a sample, and you can replicate it in any other automation or service code or script you have. So let's get started. First, let's use developer tools. In developer tools, services, type here publish for the MQTT publish. Of course, you need to have MQTT integration already done inside Home Assistant. Next, we will select a topic, and the topic is the topic we created or you left default inside the configuration file of the thermal printer. So this is printer thermal. And the only thing we need to do besides that is create a payload. Payload is what it says, a payload that will be sent from Home Assistant to the thermal printer, and thermal printer will be waiting for this payload to print it. So we'll take here and type here our test message. This is test message from Home Assistant. Exclamation mark, and don't forget to subscribe. Well, I can try, can't I? And when we now press call service, the printer should print it. And it did. Okay, so this was the easy or fun part. Well, everything with this gadget is fun part. So let's create automation that would push notification or message from Home Assistant to our thermal printer. For that, let's go to automations. Okay, and let's find something that we can use to print. For example, this air quality index warning. Let me edit it. In this automation, if this sensor value goes above 50, I received on my Telegram notification that the air quality is decreasing. Let me add here a new action. We will call service, publish. Topic is printer, thermal, and payload, we can copy the same payload we have here. Let's save it. And from now on, whenever the air quality gets worse, I will receive both Telegram message and a thermal print. Let me try to run it by hand. And it works. And this really is it for this Home Assistant how-to with BeardedTinker. I hope that you will find this video inspiring and some ideas will pop up and boil inside your head. I really would like to hear your suggestions and ideas on what you can use this thermal printer for inside Home Assistant. And don't forget, you can also hook it up with the Node-RED or any other application that can use MQTT. If you have any programming skills, I would really love to see additional pull requests or development of this firmware, because I know that there are a ton of other options that can be implemented, but not by me. I can only give you ideas and hints. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notified on future updates, and I will be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have fun.